The Unexpected Companion. A Galactic Council's Worst Nightmare. The thing about humans that the Galactic Council never quite grasped was our pathological need to protect anything we deemed adorable, helpless, or just slightly out of place. They studied our war records, our technological advancements, and our political histories. But somehow, they completely missed the cultural phenomenon of rescuing stray animals, nursing wounded birds back to health, or adopting intergalactic jellyfish that hum 20th century Earth music. Which is exactly how I, Captain Parker Somali, ended up in my current predicament, standing in front of the Department of Xenofauna Relations, trying to convince a 7-foot-tall insectoid bureaucrat that the glowing, humming creature floating beside me was not an invasive species, a bioweapon, or a security threat. "Officers tick," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Bubbles is not dangerous. She's my emotional support alien." The bureaucratic nightmare begins. Stick's long, serrated mandibles twitched, a telltale sign of exasperation. Their compound eyes reflected my image a dozen times over, making it impossible to tell if they were about to scold me or simply pass out from frustration. "Captain Somali," they clicked, voice dripping with the kind of bureaucratic exhaustion that only came from dealing with humans for too long. "There is no such classification as an emotional support alien within the Galactic Code." "Well," I shrugged, reaching up to scratch the spot where I assumed Bubbles' chin would be. She let out a pleased chiming sound, which was new. Maybe there should be. The insectoid officer let out a long, suffering sigh, tapping a clawed appendage against the holographic display in front of them. "This is the 8th non-terrestrial creature you have attempted to register in the last month alone." 7, actually, I corrected. The sentient moss colony decided it preferred living in my shower and filed for independent citizenship. That's not better, Captain." "Bubbles, the unexpected hitchhiker." I glanced at Bubbles, who had started to shift colors in slow, pulsing waves of blue and green, her tentacle-like appendages lazily drifting in the air. 3 days ago, I had found her inside an abandoned deep space station, floating aimlessly in a stasis field surrounded by archaic-looking security drones. Any sane individual would have called in a specialist, or at the very least, performed an analysis before deactivating the field. But I'm human, and we have a terrible habit of poking things to see what happens. The moment the field went down, she latched onto my shoulder like a lost puppy and started emitting a low, soothing hum. At first, I thought she was just responding to my presence. Then she started mimicking sounds. By the time we reached the station's docking bay, she was already humming the opening theme of Star Wars. Naturally, I had to keep her. The Galactic Council's endless red tape. The insectoid bureaucrat chittered in frustration, scrolling through endless lines of regulations and sub-regulations, desperately trying to find a reason to deport my newly adopted space companion. "I've already submitted the paperwork," I continued, pulling up my datapad. "Form X772 for non-terrestrial companion registration. Z115 for potentially telepathic species housing permits, and even Key 999 for creatures that occasionally phase through solid matter." Stick froze mid-scroll, antennae twitching violently. "She phases through solid matter. Only when she sneezes." Silence. "That is not better, Captain." The station's lights turned purple. Before his stick could launch into a full-blown bureaucratic meltdown, something strange happened. The station's overhead lights shifted from a sterile white to a deep, pulsating purple. A low humming reverberated through the walls, sending an uncomfortable static charge through the air. Every screen, holographic display, and data terminal flickered. Then, in perfect synchronization, ancient symbols began scrolling across every available surface. I frowned. That wasn't normal. Impossible. "These are guardian glyphs." Stick jerked upright so fast, they nearly toppled their chair, clicking their mandibles in alarm. "Impossible," they whispered. "These are guardian glyphs." I had no idea what that meant, but judging by the way every bureaucrat in the room suddenly froze, it was probably important. "The what glyphs?" Stick turned to me, their normally calm bureaucratic demeanor replaced with full-blown panic. The Guardians were an ancient intergalactic species, long extinct before the first human ever set foot in space. Their technology was said to be beyond anything the Council has ever encountered. I stared at the glyphs. They pulsed in strange, rhythmic patterns, almost like a heartbeat. Something about them felt familiar, like an echo of something I couldn't quite place. Bubbles, who had been unusually silent, suddenly started humming again. And this time, it wasn't a song from Earth. This time, it sounded like a warning. The galaxy's forgotten guardians. The pulsing symbols continued their slow, rhythmic cascade across every available screen. I wasn't an expert in xenolinguistics, but I'd seen enough pre-spaceflight human conspiracy theories to recognize a message pattern when I saw one. "These aren't just glyphs," I muttered, my fingers hovering over my datapad's translation software. "There." A call. Stick interrupted, their normally composed bureaucratic demeanor cracking under the weight of sheer disbelief. A distress signal. That got my attention. "Wait, from who?" I demanded, turning to face them. "Didn't you just say these guardians have been dead for millennia?" "That's what our records say." Stick's antennae twitched furiously as they scrolled through their own interface. "But if these glyphs are appearing now, it means that either our records were wrong, or something of them survived." I finished. That wasn't comforting. Bubbles reacts. Bubbles, who had been eerily silent since the symbols appeared, suddenly let out a low, resonant chime. Her normally iridescent, shifting colors had settled into a deep, anxious blue, her translucent tentacles trembling in a way I'd never seen before. Something was wrong. "I don't like this," I murmured, instinctively reaching out to Bubbles. She didn't recoil, but she didn't hum her usual happy notes either. Instead, she drifted closer, tentacles wrapping lightly around my wrist in what almost felt like a silent plea for comfort. "Captain," Stick said, voice uncharacteristically serious. "Your pet." "She's not a pet," I snapped. "She's a person." Stick gave me the insectoid equivalent of an exasperated sigh, but their mandibles twitched in reluctant concession. "Fine," they said. "But whatever she is, she's clearly reacting to these glyphs. If she recognizes them, she might be the only living being who understands what this message means." That was a horrifying thought. The translation begins. The symbols kept scrolling, shifting, pulsing, a sequence that felt too organic to be random, too deliberate to be merely an automated system running on forgotten code. I activated my datapad's deep space translation suite, inputting every language fragment humanity had ever compiled from our centuries of galactic exploration. The system struggled. Then, after 10 full seconds, a rough approximation of the message blinked onto my screen. It read, "The last ones are here." A chill crawled up my spine. "That's not good," I muttered. Stick's mandibles clicked rapidly in alarm. "That is significantly worse than not good, Captain." "Why?" I asked, not really sure I wanted the answer. Stick's gaze darted between the glyphs, my datapad, and Bubbles, who was now humming a low, distressing tune. "Because if this really is a Guardian transmission," they said slowly, "then whoever or whatever the last ones are." They turned toward me, all 12 of their compound eyes glinting with something dangerously close to fear. They were powerful enough to wipe out the greatest civilization this galaxy has ever known. A dead civilization's final warning. The realization hit me like an asteroid impact. The Guardians weren't just an old myth. They weren't just another long-forgotten species lost to time. They were killed. And if this message was to be believed, their destroyers were still out there. Bubbles let out a sudden, sharp ping, a chime that sounded too much like an alarm for my liking. Then she did something I'd never seen before. She opened her eyes, or at least I think they were eyes. Her glowing blue form suddenly cracked open, revealing two luminous, swirling orbs hidden beneath her translucent surface. They pulsed, once, twice, then locked onto the scrolling symbols. And then, the station's entire power grid failed, plunged into darkness. For half a second, everything was eerily silent. Then emergency lighting flickered to life, bathing the registration office in an eerie red glow. I could hear distant alarms echoing through the station. The hum of life support remained steady, but the soft vibration of the station's main power conduits had vanished. "Ah," I said. "That's probably not my fault." Stick made a strangled clicking noise that sounded suspiciously like pure bureaucratic panic. "This is a Class 1 security emergency," they hissed, scrambling to access their now frozen console. "The power grid has been compromised. That should be impossible." "Yeah, well," I said, watching as Bubbles slowly drifted forward, her gaze never leaving the glowing remnants of the Guardian glyphs still hovering in the air. I took a deep breath. "I really don't think she's the one you should be worrying about right now." The echo of something ancient. The glyphs pulsed faster, almost as if they were reacting to Bubbles' presence. Then, in a slow, deliberate rhythm, they changed. A new message appeared. "They will come." I exchanged a glance with Stick, whose antennae were so stiff with fear they looked like they might snap off. "What?" they whispered, voice barely above a clicking murmur. "Have you brought onto this station, Captain?" I looked at Bubbles. She was trembling, her tentacles curling inward, her once luminous form dimming like a candle burning too fast. I had no idea what she was. I had no idea where she had come from. But I knew one thing for certain. She was afraid. And whatever could scare something like Bubbles, that meant we should all be terrified too. The dead do not rest. The station trembles. The low rumble vibrated through the station's metal framework. It wasn't just the engines adjusting or the usual creaks of aging infrastructure. This was something deeper. It was a warning. Stick's compound eyes reflected the dim emergency lights as they twitched in every direction. This cannot be happening," they stammered. "The Guardian technology is ancient. It should have disintegrated eons ago." I had a different concern. "This station runs on a closed power system, right?" I asked. Stick's antennae trembled. "Of course. Why?" I pointed at the pulsing glyphs, still glowing faintly despite the complete shutdown of the station's core systems. "Then why are those still on?" Bubbles knows something. Bubbles hovered in the air, her normally fluid form rigid with tension. The soft, rhythmic hum she emitted had changed. It wasn't just random notes anymore. It was a song. The melody was eerie, carrying a strange weight of sorrow that sent a shiver up my spine. It felt old, as if it had traveled through time itself just to reach us in this moment. "What is she singing?" I asked. Stick's mandibles twitched. That is a Guardian mourning hymn." I stared. "How do you know that?" "I don't," they admitted. "No one alive does." We both turned to Bubbles. Her deep, glowing eyes, if they could even be called eyes, remained fixed on the glyphs. The blue glow around her body had darkened, like a storm gathering on the surface of the ocean. She wasn't just watching. She was remembering. The Guardian's final memory. The glyphs flickered. And then the station screamed. Not a literal scream. There were no speakers playing audio, but the very walls of the station trembled with something deep, something ancient. A burst of light and energy exploded from the symbols, and suddenly, we were somewhere else. I staggered back, trying to orient myself. Gone were the cold metal walls of the station. Instead, I stood in a vast, ruined city beneath an alien sky. Massive towers, once majestic, now crumbling, stretched toward a sun that no longer shone. The air was thick with dust, the remnants of something far greater than any of us. And above it all, floating in the dead sky, was a massive, broken monolith. A single word etched into its surface. Remember. A history erased. Stick stumbled beside me, their usually precise movements shaky and uncertain. "This is impossible," they rasped. This world should not exist." "What world?" I asked. They turned to me, their eyes wide with something close to fear. "The last Guardian stronghold. The place where they made their stand." I looked around at the ruins. "If this was their last stand," I said slowly, "then who were they fighting?" I didn't have to wait for an answer. A shadow moved in the distance. The enemy that never left. At first, it was just a flicker, something that might have been a trick of the light. But then the shadows shifted, coiling unnaturally, moving in ways that defied physics. Then I saw them. Figures, twisted and inhuman, like living voids in the fabric of space. Their bodies were fluid yet solid, shifting between existence and nothingness. And they were watching us. I reached for my sidearm out of instinct, but Static grabbed my wrist. "No," they hissed. "Weapons are useless against them." My stomach dropped. "Then what do we do?" The shadows moved closer. Bubbles takes a stand. Just as the first shade reached the crumbling edge of the ruins, Bubbles moved. She floated forward, her blue glow intensifying. The soft, sad hum she had been singing suddenly shifted into something louder, deeper. The shadows hesitated. I could feel something in the air, an invisible force pressing down on reality itself. Bubbles wasn't just humming anymore. She was commanding. The symbols around us blazed, the ruins shuddering as if awakening from their eternal slumber. The shadows recoiled, twisting unnaturally, as if something far older than them had just spoken a name they had hoped to forget. And then, the vision collapsed. Back to reality. I gasped, staggering back into the dimly lit registration office of the station. The glyphs were gone, the emergency lights still flickering in their dull red glow. But something had changed. Bubbles hovered in place, her usual glow faded, her body trembling. Whatever she had done, it had cost her something. Stake exhaled slowly, looking down at their trembling hands. "That wasn't just a vision," they said. "That was a memory." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to suppress the dread clawing at my gut. "What do you mean?" Stick turned to me, all 12 of their compound eyes filled with something I had never seen in them before. "Fear. I mean," they said, "that wasn't just the last message of the Guardians." They swallowed hard. That was their final warning. And whatever the Guardians had been fighting, it was still out there,